poultry industry.
Episode number 47 for the here at National Land Realty, the REALTORS Land Institute for Farm. How to raise chickens. Ashley down for about Phil, Alabama.
The poultry industry. I'm an older farm and it needed a lot. We kind of knew more. There's tons of people lining up. We just didn't have the same, our entire family in our area. So expansions
to grow is that
they'll go to our existing themselves. They have to meet certain people into the poultry industry, but they were hard workers. I mean, they're 4 years. That if you guys that and it's been put in the most where you thought it was going to be. Forrest During with National Land, his first time being a broker in my which was a big bank back then, a lot with ag lending here. I got into being a poultry.
You were talking with Forrest. He's and what it seems like is
okay. You're right. Let's go.
It was by the industry, right? This is people who. So tell me about the
close in 30 to 45 days. Started in 2021. I had really gained a name for my competitor in this area. Competitors too. So those were just the real. I can do all the things. The people that I was. I really actually trained them on our farm. A list that I kept loved me and they trusted me and they set groups in poultry and they recommended me their family and their friends. And so it really just propelled it from there. So I ended 2021 with several farms still in the books. So February of 2022, I had a lot of closings. And then I had another huge wave where I'd started in 2022 about May. Like I said, it takes about 5 to 6 months on typical, some as far as 9 to get these things through the door and closed. Poultry is more close to development. If you think of land developments, we have to have ADEM permits. We have NRCS stuff we have to get done. There's FSA guarantees that are typically involved. There is a lot of steps of getting this to the closing table. And
right. So I want to just clarify. I want to back you up a little bit. So you're talking about the duration of a sale. It's like 5 months. And when you first started talking about this, you're talking about how you spotted that a lot of people were getting into this without knowing what they're getting into. And you're talking about it like, I just want to help. And then, so when you're bringing these people on, whether it's a buyer or a seller, you're investing 5 months of your life. You brought them to your home and trained them just to make sure that the deal didn't go sour.
Well, and that was
a lot of extra, that is above and beyond anything that you normally hear of with anybody that works with land, any kind of real estate, land or whatever. You bring them into your house and home and teach them the way just to make sure that they're successful. That's a big deal.
I can't even tell you how many I've actually had out in my guest house because we have a gap between they sell everything they have in Indiana or Kansas City. A lot of my buyers are from there, Texas, and they'll sell everything they have there, including their home. And they want this farm in Alabama. And so there's that gap between I closed on this and sold my home and left my job and the closing date on this farm. And I've got to come stay. Well, a lot of times they can't stay with others that have poultry farms because they'll be a different type. So they can't go stay on a breeder farm if they're buying a broiler farm. You can't mix the two types. It's cross-contamination. You could carry in a disease from one to the other that one didn't have. And so they have to come stay in my guest house until I can get them settled on their house.
So quick, help out the uneducated in the room. I'm just talking about me. Broilers versus breeders.
Okay. So most integrators are what we call vertically integrated. So it's like a full circle. So they on all 3 steps of the process of getting us to that broiler chicken that's going out to Chick-fil-A, going out to Chick-fil-A, Walmart, Zaxby's, anywhere you're going to go buy chicken. So the very first step in this is what we call pullets. So a pullet house, they're paid based on square footage. They take little baby chicks and they raise them up to the chickens that are going to lay the eggs. So they go low and slow. They don't want to feed them fast. They want them to grow nice and slow. They want them to have nice, strong legs and be really good layers. So they stay there for a period of time. And then the next step, they get put on a truck and taken to what we call breeder farms. Okay, so a breeder farm is what people call egg houses, but they're not the eggs you're going to go to the store and buy. So breeder farms are creating the breeder stock for the broilers. So their job is to lay as many eggs as possible, and they stay there for around 36 weeks, and they're going to produce eggs like crazy. They start off nice and slow because they're just learning how to lay eggs. You get the peak, and you're going 19,000 eggs a day. It goes crazy. And then they kind of wane back down, and they get out of their cycle of laying. So those eggs every week are taken from the breeder houses to the hatchery. So they're kept in little incubators and they're hatched out. And the same day they hatch out, the minute they're hatched that day, they go straight to a broiler farm. Now we have our houses nice and hot. They're like 90 degrees. We have feed and water on the ground ready for them to go. We've got little trays where they can go, and they instantly go to these feed and water lines, and they're nice and warm and cozy. And then we grow them out to whatever desired size. So we have some programs, some integrators have like a 4.5 pound program. Some of them have a 5 pound bird program. There's 7, there's 9. It's based on what the market needs. So like if you go to Sam's or Walmart and you're buying a rotisserie chicken, that was that 485 pound target weight was that bird. But if you're going and you're buying these big, huge chicken legs somewhere, obviously that probably come up a 9 pound bird. I mean, like, so you have your different sizes to meet the needs of the buyers. And so that's what we call it, vertically integrated. They own every part of the process. They have their own feed mills. And like I said, they own every part of the steps, from the pullets to the breeders, to the broilers, to the end product they're shipping out.
And this is all on one site. This is all in one, like, so one particular outfit will have a full vertical integration, or are you going from one farm to another where the pullets are in one?
So what I always tell everybody when I'm deciding, like when you're deciding what area is for what integrator, or where you can build houses, what land to look for poultry build sites, is you take your processing plant, your hatchery, and your feed mill, and it's going to make a triangle. So like, just say our Tyson that I grow for, our feed mill is in Brundage, our processing plant's in Baker Hill, and our hatchery is in Eufaula. So you could draw a triangle, and then I take and draw a circle around that. And everything that fits within that circle is where you could be potential build sites, because they want you to be close to one of those 3 things. You know, you've got to get feed, your chickens have to go to the processing, your chickens have to come from the hatchery. So you need to be in one of those. So I own a broiler farm. I only own a broiler farm.
Got it. Okay.
In my area, just if you drew like a 10-mile radius around just my farm, you would have probably at least 6 other or more broiler houses. But if you start getting toward just 5 miles down the road from my house, you start getting toward Clio, there you have a huge concentrated of breeder farms. So while we have a lot of broilers in Louisville, Clio is 5 miles down the road, they have a lot of breeder farms. But we all grow for the same complex. And some of those circles go around. So like in my area, you can grow possibly for Pilgrims, possibly for Tyson, or possibly for Wayne Farms. Okay, but if I just go a little west into West Alabama, well, then I start getting into cooked foods. That's a different integrator. Their circle doesn't intersect with ours. They don't really have much competition there. If you go to North Alabama, you'll get avian. You get different ones there. Avian, you have cooked foods up there. You have Tyson. You have your integrator. You also have Wayne Farms up there. So you have, like, when you go to different areas, just because I have a Tyson here, don't mean you'll have a Tyson where you are. You could have Wayne Farms, or you could have cooked foods, or you could have one of these other processing facilities. So it all is just based on where their processing plants are, their feed mills are, things like that. Now, some integrators buy eggs. Sometimes they don't have enough breeder farms to supply their broilers, and they'll buy eggs from, maybe they might have a Wayne Farms in Mississippi, and that Wayne Farms in Mississippi might cart eggs all the way down here to the hatchery here in Dothan, Alabama, or Enterprise, right, one of their locations. So sometimes they don't have enough to fill it, but most of them can completely handle it within their own company.
Gotcha. So each one of these companies is completely vertically integrated. They're doing everything from start to finish within the company, but then using farms to like run the
contractors.
Yeah.
Contractors, but you cannot have a breeder and a broiler. You can only have one or the other, because you can't go, like if I'm to go into my breeder farms to show them when I'm showing listings, I have to suit up in a blue suit, hairnet, booty covers, everything, to make sure that I'm not bringing in anything that could affect these birds. And the same thing if I'm in my broiler farm in Tyson, but I know I'm showing a Wayne Farms farm, I have to be in completely different clothes, and I have one pair of boots that's for my own chicken farm, and then I have a different pair of boots that's for showing farms. I can't cross-contaminate anything, so I have to be very careful. I try not to ever actually pull into a farm. I park outside the gates and walk in. I mean, you have to be very careful with not doing anything to hamper those birds. You don't want to bring in anything that they could catch, or because everybody vaccinates different. The vaccination program for Wayne Farms is different from Tyson. It's different from Pilgrims. And so you could bring in something from one farm to another, and that's, dangerous. And with the bird flu, you don't want to. So we
I was going to say one chicken sneezes, you got to get rid of the whole batch. Like that becomes a real, like,
Yeah, so you want to be extremely careful, and so that's why we have like it's a whole ordeal just to show a farm. Like we have to suit up, and I try to never go in them when they're like even in the control system. I try to always show farms when they're out of birds. Like if we've got a window that we're going to be out of birds for 2 weeks, those are the times that I want to show that farm. When there's no birds in the house and there's no risk. With breeders, you never go into the part that actually houses the birds. The only thing you go into is the breezeways, and you look in the little windows at them. I mean, so there's very strict.
Really?
Yes, like there's very strict. We do not. And then, if they're really serious in it, we can come back when we don't have birds. But breeders go for like 10 months. They have the same flock for like 10 months. Whereas we sell every 40 days. Big birds sell about every 65 days. I mean, so with rollers, it's easy to find a way to get in there, when they're out of birds. But with the breeders, you can't. You just got to look through the window, stay in the breezeways, suit up, and get out.
So, and what I'm hearing from you is there's an awful lot of opportunity for somebody that doesn't know what they're doing to really tick some people off. Because I could just imagine I would just step all over everybody. I wouldn't know any of that. And it would. So, I mean, if you don't have expertise, you're not even going to show the property the right way. Right. Like it's.
Right. That's why it's so important to have a poultry specialist on your side. That's why it's so important as a buyer to have a poultry specialist, if that's what you're looking for, and not someone who isn't in this industry, who doesn't know, who could potentially set you off for the company not approving you or that seller not approving you because you just bombarded on their farm in the middle of them picking up eggs. You didn't suit up. You didn't follow any protocol. Like you have to know what the right procedure. And you have to know the right times, and you really need to understand the industry in order to do an effective job.
So I want to ask you sort of about the outlook of the industry right now, but kind of before we jump into that, because I'm just curious about how, what you're seeing in the industry right now for sure. But I want to backtrack a little bit. You were talking about helping out, people that have never been to poultry before. You have families that have moved in from Burma and Vietnam, and I'm assuming are probably even new to like culture in the United States if they've moved in from other countries.
Pirates Voyage Dinner and Show, the most fun place to eat in Myrtle Beach.
It's an eye-popping spectacle of beauty, action, fire, and water.
Join Captain Blackbeard and his crew for an action-packed pirate adventure.
Pirates Voyage, the most breathtaking dinner show ever.
All this excitement and more while enjoying a fabulous 4-course feast. Pirates Voyage, the most fun place to eat in Myrtle Beach. You better call now.
Most of them moved in before they got here. Like most of them have already, it's a really, really cute story about, especially a lot of reasons why a lot of my Burma come here. The first mission trips that we ever sent out with the Alabama Baptist Association was to Burma. Okay. And so a lot of them are Christian refugees whose family come a long time ago, and they put them in really dense populations like Indiana and Kansas City, places where they could easily find housing and employment. And so a lot of them associate that kindness, that love, that acceptance with Alabama. And that's the reason why there's such a concentration of wanting these Alabama, Georgia, these farms around here, is because that's what they associate that with kindness and love, and the people who stepped in and helped them find a better way of life. But they've been in the cities and they want back to the way Burma was. Burma was agriculture. You grew your own food. You lived in a community. You had the farmers markets. You traded with one another for what you needed, a lot like we do here. Like I run our farmers market in Clayton, Alabama. I mean, if I've got eggs and you got blueberries, we're going to trade, And so that's that way of life they went back to. But they're tired of the busyness, but they still want to be, raise their kids the way they were raised, but in a place where they feel safe to do so.
So this is not brand new to the U.S. This is okay. That's much different than that. When I had it in my head that it was something different. Anyways, so regardless, these are families that have not worked around poultry, right? So how difficult is it to jump into something like this? You mentioned being unready, like not realizing, you got to actually work, but despite that, like just the overall the complications of starting out like a large poultry operation, how crazy is this?
It is pretty crazy. One of the first things that, I have the conversation with them is, what is your background? What did you do before you come? Are you an electrician? Do you know how to wire a motor? Because there is a lot of motors in a poultry farm. Every single feed line has a motor. Every single fan has a motor. There are tons of motors and electrical parts to this. This is just like running maintenance in a plant that you're at. You've got all of these houses with tons of motors in every one of them. So how well of an electrician are you? Can you troubleshoot basic? If the water level's low, do you know what to do? So I try to get the basic knowledge of what was your background and let me show you how this is going to be useful in what you're doing. So I've had a lot of electricians. I've had a lot of just maintenance guys in general. They worked in processing plants, but then I had a lot of guys that were like, no, I just, worked on the line at a processing facility, or, I just worked in a factory, or, so they don't have the background. And so that's where you really want to take the time and kind of show them, the basics. It just depends on where you're starting at with them. But getting them to understand that one of the biggest things you need in the poultry industry is a maintenance background. You have to be able to change out that feed line motor. You have to be able to change out that water nipple. You have to be able to change out the water meter in the control room. You have to understand when the fan's going out, if it's the bearing, the belt, the motor, what you need to do. Sometimes it's just the little wires going to it. Sometimes we have to trace back the wire to figure out what little wire has been rubbed or, shorted, so we can just put a wire nut on, fix it, and keep going. But you need to understand those things. The heaters are another big deal to work on. And so my husband has a great maintenance background. A lot of people who go into poultry do, and it saves you a lot of money, and it's a lot of the knowledge you need. You at least need to be able to basically troubleshoot it. So that's step one. What from your background can we take into poultry, and let me show you how you're going to use it here. And then step two is the basic husbandry of growing chickens. You always want to make sure they have, depending on the program or what type of house you have, the right feed, the right amount of feed, that, all your feed lines are operating. You want to make sure that they have the right water all the time, that they have constant supply of water and feed. So you need to teach them the basic husbandry. You don't want your floors to get wet because that'll affect their little paws. We call it paws. That's your paw score, but it's their little feet. Well, that's one of the biggest commodities of poultry, especially in China. A lot of the little feet get shipped to China because it's a delicacy there. So you want to make sure their little feet stay in the absolute best, soft, tender, beautiful condition. So you don't want the floor to get wet or anything that's going to hinder that. You have to teach them the basic. Okay, this is what you're responsible for. You want to make sure that this is this way at all times. And then it's kind of teaching a routine, what times of day you come in, how often, you want to make sure. A small thing in another industry could swap out an entire flock for us. So you want to make sure that you're making sure that your generators are tested every single week, that you're there when it runs, that you're logging those hours. You want to make sure that all of your stuff is working properly, because one thing not going right can kill off your entire flock if you're negligent. So you want to be sure that you push that into their knowledge, that you have to be here for every one of these little things. You need to check on your houses 3 to 4 times a day. You need to make sure that you're on this farm and that it's operating correctly. And so, that's teaching them the basic husbandry of it, the routine of it, when you need to be there, and then that's when we try to start getting hands-on, and once we know that they understand the basics of it, we make sure their background's compatible for it. You want to make sure that they're not making a mistake in their decision. So that's when either I'm going to send them to my farm, let them run it with us for a little while if they're going into broilers, or I've sold so many in the area close to me at this point that usually I can find a friend or a relative of theirs that they can go and work with that has the same type of farm. And they can really understand it. They can understand their own language often. And so it helps a lot to get them to make sure that this is what they want to do before we dive off and sell off everything you own. And I want to make sure we're making that decision for you and your family.
So one, from the sounds of it, y'all don't take a lot of vacations, do you?
No, we really don't. You're tied down. If you got birds in the house, you're not going.
You're tied down. You're in it.
We have a 3-acre pond that the kids keep kayaks and paddle boards, and we got a little cabin on it. And then we have an in-ground pool at the house so that the kids, they have what we call in-house vacations, staycations.
Yeah.
So when we get done with chickens, we got a break before we go back and check it. We can go play on the pond at the cabin, or we come home and dive in the pool. So we try to have a lot of staycations so that way the kids realize they're not getting vacations.
Well, and I was going to say on the other side of this too, if people take on, like you say, one of the companies, Tyson or somebody, goes on a growth period and starts expanding. And you mentioned, and I'll let you explain it too. Like you mentioned expansion. if they start doing that and you have people taking on new poultry farms and they don't know what they're doing, you run into a situation where that company might be less likely to expand in that area. So it's in everybody's best interest that you get whoever takes on a new poultry farm, that they are as prepared and as effective as possible. So you're sort of, it's kind of like a whole environment that you're helping in here, and you're helping kind of drive this entire economy by just assisting people and helping them, be good at what they do, right?
Well, a lot of times if you're going to do new build, like a lot of times it's on family land, things like that. There's a lot of the expansions that I'm only a part of the ones that are coming in and from the outside. The company actually will do really good. If you're a new farmer coming in and building, when they're doing expansions, you are kind of depending on your service tech. So every single farm is assigned. My husband used to be one. We call them flock supervisors, service techs, chicken police, whatever you want to call them. And
chicken police, I like that.
They're saved in our phone as the chicken and police card, the chicken police. And so everyone has their names for them. But and their job is to guide you. You call them when something's wrong. If your birds are acting weird and they're all clinging to the walls, or they're not eating, or they're not gaining like you should, you call that service tech. They're going to come. They're actually so well trained that they can cut the chicken open and tell you exactly what's wrong with your flock. Or either they're going to take it to the lab in Auburn, take a sample of them and take them to the lab to be tested. I mean, they take it very seriously. And those integrators provide you with that person who's making sure that you are following the rules, that you are providing the right amount of feed, the right amount of water, the right temperature, the right air quality, the right pressure. I mean, you'd be surprised how scientific, how high tech these houses are. The wrong little bit of pressure, air pressure, too much, not enough wind flow, all that, it's going to alarm you. Like, it's like, no, this is not perfect, and our chickens need perfect. So you need to come here and fix it. So, I mean, it's very, very high tech. And these flock supervisors come in to supervise you. They're there on behalf of the integrator, but they're also there to help you. They're there to help you do the best job you can do. And their goal is for you to succeed and grow the biggest and best bird you can. And so they're there for a lot of the new farmers. We've had a lot of friends that built houses with the last expansion in our area. And they were trained really well by the service techs. And they're there for that first flock a lot more than they are after that, to really teach a lot to you. But when I'm the one selling the farm, or I'm the one that, like, a lot of times they'll say, okay, well, we're going to expand this many. I need you to find this many poultry build sites, and, clients, that we need this many more outsiders coming to build. So at that point, that's when I'll train those. That's when I go and try to find a piece of land that's, 1,500 feet from that church and 1,500 feet from any house and business, and that we're off the road, and that there's not another farm real close by that is going to, of a different type. And so you have to be very, very curious on finding the right build site. And then once you find that build site, you need to make sure it's not in a floodplain, that it's, pretty decently level, that it's not going to take a huge amount of money to construct these huge pads to build these chicken houses on. And so it is a lot to it, but that's where we get to start from the beginning when it comes to expansions. And then most of the time we're coming in, like I said, if people get burned out after the first few years and selling that farm, when they realize that either it just wasn't what they signed up for, or it was more work than they realized, or it took too much time from their family, or sometimes it's just other, like, medical things come up. I've had a lot of them that has been medical issues. Hey, I started out this perfectly healthy, but, I've been ignoring this torn ACL all these years, and now I've got to have surgery, and I'm going to be unable to fulfill my farm. So a lot of times it's medical reasons. And then retirement. There's a lot of them that, even though they're older growers and they have been in the poultry industry for years, they expanded. They had this other farm that might have been with the last big build. The first big build around here was, and for the Tyson in this particular area that I'm at, was like, you have a lot of those 98, 2001. That was those years were the primary building for the Baker Hill complex. You've got some that go back as far as the 80s when you get in the Wayne Farm ones. So a lot of those growers, they build on. When there's an expansion, they'll add newer houses to keep their business going. I mean, they want to continue to grow chickens. I mean, it's just who you are. When you start, you're a poultry producer, it's in your DNA. It just becomes who you are. It's part of your identity. So they continue that, and they want it for their children. And then a lot of times though, children who are raised in it don't want chicken houses. They want to go on vacation. They don't want to be tied down to a flock, And so that's when Dad always calling, going, look, I want a house on the beach. Let's sell this farm, do a 1031 exchange. let's go buy an investment property. I want that timber investment that doesn't require me to be there. Like I want to get out of this into something I can pass on to my kids that they'll use, the thing is, okay, if your kid doesn't want the chicken houses, let's sell it. Let's do a 1031 exchange. Let's buy you a timber investment where all they have to do is let someone cut down the trees and they can go hunt it and enjoy it,
Right.
So that's often what I run into is they built with the latest expansion, but then the kids didn't want it. So they're like, okay, I want out. Let's roll this into something that my kids do want and that they will use and they'll be happy to inherit. It's not work every day.
Which makes a lot of sense. And that's very common in ag areas is you have a rotation of families. It's like it becomes like a family succession. And then you eventually get to that generation. It's like, I want to go to an apartment in the city. Mowing lawn is terrible. I don't even want to feed cows. Like that happens. And eventually you have a rotation. You have a new family come in and do that. So I can imagine it's similar with the poultry industry. I see an amazing number of those kids come back. We sell it all off. They're done. They don't want nothing to do with farming. And then you fast forward, and they get in their 30s and 40s and all of a sudden they're coming back home and they want the same thing they grew up in. They want that way of life. It's not what they thought, but we're so sheltered in these small towns that usually have poultry. I mean, if you're looking at poultry farms, you're not going to find them in the middle of a big city. We want to be outside, way away from the towns. You want to be out and most of the time they're in the middle of nowhere. That's kind of what you're looking for with the poultry industry. You don't want to be on top of someone because they're so large and, there is a lot of trucks in and out and live birds, so they're usually in these rural towns and they want out of the little town. They want to move to the big city, but then they usually always come back. Which definitely makes sense. I go through that just in my area. My wife and I have been just exploring moving back to where we grew up because it's like, you grow up in a small town, you want to get out, like you want to experience everything. And then you do experience everything. You're like, I need to go back to the small town because I'm done with this. Which is totally a thing. Mm-hmm. You mentioned the word expansion a few times, and you've mentioned how there was an original expansion in 2000, 2001, I think you said. And then more recently, what is that? What is an expansion? And when it comes down to poultry?
Okay, so when I say expansion, I mean we've had this processing facility that was built in that time frame of the first build that I was talking about. So they grow birds for a while. Everything runs foods. They've got it down to perfection, right? This is an art. They know exactly how many birds they can get through that plant. Okay, and then all the buyers are like, you're doing great. I need more. I need you to have this many more birds. If you had them, I'd buy this many more from you. So then we hit expansion. So like for us with our Tyson and Baker Hill, we added on another processing line. We renovated the whole processing facility and we added a whole second line. So when we added the second line, which meant we just doubled our processing capabilities. Now we need to double the amount of broilers that we have in the field. Okay, so that means we have to build more pullets, we have to build more breeders, and then we have to build more broilers. So that is what we call expansion. We've outgrown the capacity that we have. We've now doubled that capacity, so we need to meet the demands. So we need to expand everything. You got to expand the feed mill, you got to expand the processing, and then you have to build all these houses. And so we'll start out conservative. Usually they'll start out and say, okay, we just want this many. We'll start always with pullets and breeders. They have to be built first because you can't supply the broilers without the pullets and breeders. So that's the first department to expand. So the first round of expansion is always the pullets and the breeders. And then you start building on with the broilers. Well, with every round of expansions, and it's really funny, they usually always line up for a large area. So like if the demand's increased for this processing facility, odds are it's increasing everywhere and all of them start expanding within a few years of each other. And so it's really funny how that always happens, but usually the technology also is new. So like, whereas the first round of building back in that 99 or really all the way to the 80s to about 2011, I would say, most houses were 42 by 500 or smaller. Some of them were 42 by 400. You had small, they're narrow and long because that's how you can get that wind speed through there to maintain the air quality, the temperature, and all that you need. Well, then when we started this big expansion, started about 2011 was about the time Cook Food started. It got about 2015 for us. I mean, like all these years, these people are experimenting with mega houses. That's what you see now. So now we went from 42 wide by 500 long to 60 wide and 600 feet long. So now I can get the same bird capacity that goes in 2 of the old houses into 1 mega house. So it reduced the amount of controllers I needed. It reduced the amount of roofs I have to maintain. It reduced the amount of trusses. I mean, it took your equipment. It still has the same amount of feed and water lines that you would have on the same operation if it had been normal house, but you only have 4 controllers. Whereas it would have been an 8-house farm, you would have had 8 controllers. So now that 4-house mega farm can produce the same amount of birds as that 8-house regular farm could have. So you get new technology. Okay, with our big round of updates we come out, Rotom is a big name brand in the poultry industry. It's the controller we use, the computer that runs our houses. We come out with Rotom communicators where we can literally pull up on our phones and see the exact temperature of every house. We can see the water pressure. We can see what's an alarm, what needs to be fixed, all from your phone. You couldn't do that before. You got to go to the farm. You know, we still have to go to our farm. We don't have communicators, but Chore Time also come up with it. Big Dutchman. These are big name brands that are in the poultry industry. But we have an entire universities that have departments that are just for developing this technology. They're just for testing this out, what the best program is, the grow programs. Here in our area, Auburn University has this amazing facility, and it is the Poultry Science Technology Center. And they have miniature chicken houses set up, and they have their own miniature processing facility. And they are constantly testing out every new piece of equipment that comes out, which controllers are the best, which water nipples are the best, which one has the best output, which one holds up for the longest. So the technology advances, it seems like with every one of these expansions. It usually comes with big upgrades in technology. And then it makes the ones who have older houses want to add in new houses because they want this new technology, or we'll update our existing houses to be compatible with what these can do. And so it always comes with new updates. Expansions come with nice shiny new equipment, new technology that we didn't have before. And it really drives those universities and all to really put in the research and the research funds to it, because when the expansions hit, it goes everywhere. So they really want to make sure that we're making the best decisions.
So this is, I mean, it's a really, sounds like a logistical just nightmare, right? As far as like when it happens, like we're going to grow, right? We're expanding the processing plant. So it's not just we make the processing plant bigger and maybe people will make more chickens. It's like, no, you have to do this whole process of acquiring land, getting the buildings in place, getting the supply chain in place, making sure that the local, and you mentioned feed mills. I wouldn't have even thought of that. Like you got to make sure that there's enough feed getting transported to that area to support the chickens. And I'm assuming you don't just like throw typical scratch at them. Like you have stuff that's supplied by Tyson or whoever that you're using the word integrator, whoever the integrator or whatever the integrator uses for their food supply. It's probably a special mix that they get. So you got to make sure that can get in.
And so when we expand and we expand in the area, we're helping the economy everywhere, because now not only do we add more jobs to the processing plants, not only do we add more contract growers, but we doubled the feed capacity, right? Well, your corn and all of your inputs, they come a lot of times from the local farmers, like by the truckloads. The local farmers are what are supplying to the feed mills that are local to them. So we just increased the need for the farmers too. So, I mean, it is a full circle thing that helps everyone when we are doing this. So, I mean, it supplies jobs for the entire area. And so when everyone expands at one time, it creates a lot of new jobs. Because
it's a full ecosystem, right? Like this is a full top to bottom ecosystem. Because I grew up in, I mean, you know, I've got a lot of rancher friends, got a lot of farmer friends, and the big one growing up was always timber. Like my dad was a logger. Most of my friends' dads were loggers. And you see a relationship between the community and the local sawmill that is pretty tight knit, but it's nothing like this. This is where like people are growing each other's food. People are growing the chickens that go to the processing plant that other people work on, and the mill that processes what the farmers like. This is a full spectrum ecosystem, as opposed to some of these other communities that I'm sort of used to. It's new to me. It's very interesting. And this isn't to downplay, you know, what you do see in some of these logging communities or what you see in some of the farming communities that I'm talking about. It's just that there have been certain changes that have taken place over the years where, say, you know, a sawmill has closed. And what's happened is there's a little more diversity in these communities. It's not just logging or not just farming or anything like that. It's not an enclosed ecosystem like what we're talking about here. This is poultry related ecosystem that you're talking about. I'm sure there's probably some diversity. I'm probably overstepping on some of this, but it just seems like this is much more intertwined than what sort of I'm accustomed to seeing. That's why this is all very interesting to me.
It is. It drives the entire economy for the areas they're in. Like one of our biggest economic drives here is the poultry facilities. I mean, everyone in our little area, most of them's jobs somehow touch the poultry industry. Either they work on someone's poultry farm, they're cleaning out chicken houses, they own chicken houses, they work at the processing facility, they work at the feed mill, they work at the hatchery, they're the truck drivers that are driving to and from the farms, delivering the feed, delivering the chickens. I mean, like it touches an entire community in that circle. Like I said, we draw that triangle, that circle around it. Usually every family within that circle is touched somehow by the poultry industry when an integrator comes into their area. And a lot of times that's another great thing is when we talk about expansion, sometimes it is a whole expansion. Like, okay, we're in this town and we don't have one in this part of this state, so let's go here and build one. So, I mean, sometimes expansion can be expanding where we're at in the process field we have and grow in this community that we've already established. But sometimes it's establishing a whole new processing plant in a whole new area because we've already crowded this one. There's only so much more you can do. You're running out of places that are 1,500 feet from everything, and so we need to go to a whole nother part of town and build these, and you're creating all that job, all those industries, all those land purchases. You're making a big, huge impact on that economy and the job force.
Oh, no, it's crazy because I'm just imagining like a room full of people looking at a map like, you know what we need? Let's build a village here because there's nothing there. We're just going to make a whole because you need you need it to be nowhere.
You want it in the middle of nowhere. The more in the middle of nowhere it is, the better.
So what is, I'm guessing there's some cycles to the industry, just like with any industry. What's going on in the poultry industry right now? A
lot of the triggers you're going to hear right now are where Tyson's their stocks dropped, and you start hearing things like that, and it kind of scares you. But let me tell you something. Chicken, I always tell everybody, chicken is one of the things that is like recession proof. So when everything's doing good, it's the most stable thing there is. When everything's doing great, right? Our economy's doing great. Everyone has good money. Everyone's working good. Okay, well, then you get the niche markets of poultry. Then everybody, they still want chicken. When everything's doing good, you're still going to eat chicken. It might be the fancy restaurant and you might want to know the chicken's name it came from, but you're still eating chicken. But when everything goes bad and the economy starts dropping, guess what? The cheapest protein is chicken. So whether times are great and doing good, the poultry industry is doing good. When times are bad and recessions hit and things kind of go through that dip, everybody's still eating chicken. So it is one of the most stable things you can get into. Well, what happened is we've had really great years. We've had a long time of really good years. And typically in the industry, there's a lot of just up and down. So you go through a lot of little hills and hollers, as I like to say. But we've just been on a hill. We've been climbing. We've been climbing for so long now without any dips that when COVID hit and all of a sudden we went to having a hard time getting employees to go into the processing facilities at all. You had shutdowns. You had long layout times. To get our employees back in, we had to up wages. We had to up benefits. We had to fight hard to get people to go to work. Well, then all of the components, all the inputs into the processing increased. I mean, it costs more for electricity now. It costs more for gas and propane, all the components to it. Well, it does for the feed too. So the inputs for the poultry feed, the corn, all the different things that go into it, all of the inputs have went up. The cost it takes to pay your employees have gone up, but the chicken still costs the same. It's that, times are going down, so you can't jack up the price of chicken because then it wouldn't sell. So you can't increase the price of your products when times are not as good. So now that we've kind of coasted into that, it's not the market to jack up the price of poultry because then you make it unattainable for the families who need it, which has always been the staple. So
you're kind of binding yourself to you're going to have a profit shortfall during that time because you can't jack up the price as much. So then that would affect your stock value. Yeah.
And they weren't prepared for it because everything's been so good for so long. There's been no hollers to the hills. It's just been straight mountain climbing. And so it just hit, and it hit hard, and it was unprepared for it because the management and all you have in place now and the experts you have and the corporate staff you have in all these places, they weren't around most likely for some of the shortcomings in the past. So they weren't as prepared. You get safe, you get not going to say sloppy, but you just get in that comfort zone, where you're not trying, you don't have that fail safe in place because it hadn't happened in so long and everything's going so good. You don't see it coming. And so in a lot of Tyson was the first one hit because Tyson has the most exposure to, in my opinion. They're not only a poultry industry, they're also swine and they're also beef. And once again, you eat steaks when everything's good, but you don't eat steaks when everything's not good. You can't afford steaks. And so, it hit them on more than one faucet. The poultry part of it is what stabilizes their other two markets because it is so consistent, it's so dependable. But even when this all hits, even the poultry took a hit because those inputs that went up. And I think their exposure in the other markets is what kind of drug it all down. I don't think it was poultry in general, but it definitely has taken a hit. And I think the other integrators, you'll see it for more than just Tyson. I think you're going to start seeing those corporate layoffs in other markets, other integrators as well. But if you look back historically, they always bounce back. It's not going to stay low. It's going to come back. They know how to cut the fat, skin it back down and get it back going up because we need chicken. You're going to eat chicken no matter what, right? So it's going to keep being produced. It's going to come back. But there's a lot of benefits in this time. When things are rough, yes, interest rates are high, which makes it hard to go make $1 million investment or $3 million investment. That's usually the price range in these farms. You're anywhere from $1 million to $3 million, depending on what kind of operation you're buying or building. So, this is a huge investment to take, and you're thinking that's some really high interest rates. But let me tell you, there is a benefit to taking advantage of the market when things are unsure like this. When you have, the integrator's taking a little hit and fall, that's pushing some people away. The interest rates are high, that's pushing other folks away. So whereas maybe this time last year, I would have had a farm available for 24 hours and then I'd have had 5 offers on it. You actually can pick and choose. Now I can actually take the time to show someone every farm I have available on the market. And guess what? When interest rates get better, there's usually most of the lenders have a binder that says, hey, you can have one time for this fee to refinance, not refinance, but change your interest rate for a fee instead of having to refinance the whole thing. They know the interest rates are high too. The banks are really willing to work with you. They're the NRCS and different programs like that. They really step in. FSA, there's a lot of programs out there to help buyers get into the poultry industry. And the harder the times get, usually the harder they step in, the more that they're going to help, the more programs they create to be available. So you're coming into a time where you have less competition for the houses you want. You're coming into a time where you have more assistance with government programs and farm agencies. And you're in a time where you're going to be valued. Sometimes when things get really good as growers, we just become a number. We're just a farm and there's 50 million people behind us to replace us if we don't, want to do like we want to do or whatever. But we're valued. Right now, they value the loyalty of the people who are staying in the industry. They value the people who are willing to step up and come in and continue this. So you have value right now and you're like a prized possession to the integrators. Whereas, when everything's good and booming and we become a number, you're just one of 50 integrators. Now you're one of the loyal integrators. You're one of the loyal, growers and contractors. Whereas, when everything's good, you're not as valued as much. And so there's a lot of benefits to coming in to when the market is like it is.
What's the old quote? I was going to say, what's the old quote is friendship doesn't mean much when times are good.
Mm-hmm.
It's
exactly the best quote for the poultry industry. Yeah,
they value you when times are rough. I guess I wouldn't have thought about that before, but chicken is sort of like the ubiquitous product. Outside of the country, I think there's a lot of people that look at, they go to the store and they pick up chicken and they don't even associate it with an animal or the process or the fact that that's meat. It's a product on a shelf in a package half the time. And it's because it's hard because it's everywhere. It's in everything. And so it's one of those, and you're exactly right. It's the most affordable source of good protein you can find. Even diets that restrict red meat and stuff like that. It's so just go down to chicken and rice and
yep.
So it's always kind of a thing. So market wise, they've taken a dip and it just recalibration time. It happens cyclically, but they just had and I feel like everything, right? Every part of our economy right now, we just had this 20-year expansion economically, where it's the largest period of economic growth in our country's history without a significant, disaster, right? And so we've got this long period of growth, and then you have a lot of people that aren't ready.
That's right. And we'll all recalibrate. We'll get our bearings under us, and everything will back. But there are so many benefits when you're living in that time of the pause, when everyone's regaining their bearings. There's so many things that you can take advantage of in that market. And that's what people need to understand, is that it's going back up. So take advantage of it once down. Like, this is the time. Hey, yeah, the interest rate may be higher, but the cash flow on that farm is probably going to be a little lower. And so that means you can get into the farm for less than what you probably could have last year. And then when the interest rates change and you can fix that, well, then you still got into that farm for a better price than what you would have a year ago. You didn't have the competing offers. You didn't have, so it's a buyer's market right now. They need to look past the interest rate, because that's a temporary, and look at the permanent thing. That principal amount you're paying for that farm doesn't go away. So, I mean, if you don't have competing offers where you're having to pay over top and put more down and all that, then, it's really a market to ease into, and then you can fix the interest rate going forward. When it fixes itself, then you can, but you can't. This is anywhere from a 10 to 15 to 20 year commitment. So, I mean, there's no way the interest rates are going to stay this high for the next 20 years. Somewhere in that, you'll be able to lower that interest rate, but it's not going to change that principal amount you paid for that farm.
Right. So I talked to you before you won award for National Broker. Let me get the title right. The National Broker of the Year in Agribusiness. I was just going to say National Broker of the Year, but National Broker of the Year in Agribusiness. I talked to you before that. And because, I mean, we had our national convention and stuff, and you just rattled off a little bit of this information when we were there. It's like every time I talk, like, you won that award, and I was like, yeah, of course. And you're just talking about this stuff now. This material so comfortably that you can just down to the nuts and bolts of the fan engines, right? I'm just amazed by just this world. How long did it take you to build this knowledge?
I'm going to be honest with you. My husband is who gets all the credit for that. Straight out of high school, he went to work with what is now Tyson. Back then it was Equity Group. But his dad actually helped build the processing plant when it originally came here. And he was, by the time JoJo got out of high school, his dad was maintenance planner, maintenance superintendent. I mean, he was really high up at the processing plant. And so my husband went in kind of on the ground. He didn't want to work in there. You don't ever want to work with dad. So he went to the AWFAL, the wastewater department of it. There is not a chlorine pump. I mean, he would call me after he got off working on these electrical pumps in the middle of a sludge pond out there on this little skip. And I'm like, don't tell me that, or, all the training he had to go through. So we were really hands-on. It was a whole family thing. Like, I mean, it was just, it's what his dad did. It's what, we lived, eat, sleep, and breathe the processing plant in that stage of life. And then he became a flock supervisor. Well, my husband's not as technically advanced as a lot were. So I had to help in all aspects of that too. When it come to working that smartphone, teaching him how to do that back then, that was a new thing. He'd always had a Southern link where you just press the button and it beep, beep, so we had to learn a lot. And the company has always been gracious enough. They've kind of always included me in everything. Like, we always went to all the meetings together and also, and then I would help him on his farms he was the flock supervisor for. A lot of times that meant we were out there at night figuring out what went wrong with that grower. If he had something go up, JoJo was going. He was very dedicated to his growers. And when we had our third child, we decided it was time for us to own our own farm. And that's kind of when we transitioned from working for the integrator to growing for the integrator. And so, I mean, that we've just always done everything together. And it was just hands-on for both of us. My farm is Raising Grace. That's the name of my farm. And it was actually named that because that's what propelled us into being producers was my daughter, Ailey Grace. It was all about growing grace. It was raising grace up on this farm. And so raising grace in the poultry industry and in the farm and lifestyle, that was what it was all about. And so that is where my farm name came from. My husband's
competitive. I want to jump into. Does it get competitive with the other kids? Like one kid got the farm name and the others didn't?
No, they never cared. They really hadn't. They knew that it was all about, she's the baby. Everybody's world is about her. I mean, their world is too. They give her whatever. She's just spoiled. So they already know the world revolves around her. Okay. She brings into this house. I mean, like we all know it's okay. We just accept it. It's her world and we live in it. So the first two are super close in age. So with her having the gap and coming the baby, she was their baby too. So she's as spoiled by them as she is us.
That's funny. So it was sort of passed down from like your husband's father to him, and then you jumped in and sort of directed the technology side, and now the kids are involved. Like this is a full and that's why I wanted to ask is like it's the full family. It's your whole life, right? Like.
Well, and then my husband has several siblings, and actually his sister and brother-in-law also had breeder houses. So we've always helped in the breeder houses. Now they have pullet houses. So we have firsthand experience from running every type of farm, because we've always had broilers. We've always helped in their breeders. Even as teenagers, we helped in their breeders. Now they have pullets as well. So, I mean, we have literally helped operate every facet, which is why I'm so knowledgeable on every type of farm. At this point, more knowledgeable than my husband for doing this, the different types other than broilers, because he's always in broilers and I'm in all of them. But
how often is he coming to you for advice now?
Never. But now I will call him for advice. Like, he doesn't have to deal with the breeders and the pullets as much. But now, I'll call him when I'm sitting on a farm. I'm going, okay, look, because even my sellers, they'll call me and my husband to help fix things with the product. I had one call me the other day. He's one of my favorites. And he was like, my dimmer is going crazy. What do I need to do to fix this? And so JoJo got on the phone with him and helped him troubleshoot it, because there's hardly anything in a poultry house my husband can't fix. And, he went through so much training as a service tech. There's not a computer, what we call them, the computer, in a house that he can't work on, whether it be Rotom or Tortime or whatever. So he has just become known in this area for his expertise in the equipment in them and the maintenance, because that's what he did before, was maintenance. And so, I mean, he can fix anything in a chicken house, and he can work on our computers in there. And so anyways, we get a lot of calls on help, come fix this. He also cleans out chicken houses. So, I mean, like, we are just, there's not an aspect of it that we're not into. And so I've always been one of those types that I'm a sponge. If I get excited about something or I'm all in on something, I'm all in. There's not a book I'm not going to read. There's not an article I'm not going to read. I need to know everything about it. And so that's how, and even in the banking industry, I used to go into these processing plants all over, Wayne Farms, Pilgrims, Tyson, and do what we call at-work accounts. Well, I'm bilingual in Spanish and English. And so I was a shoe-in for all of these plants. And I would go in and help establish accounts for their direct deposits through BB&T. And so I've just always been huge in the poultry industry, like always been in the different integrators, had connections in all different integrators, from even my banking experience now to the real estate.
I love all that. That's fantastic. That's so cool. There's a part of me that identifies that. My wife and I are both in marketing, and it's funny because there's competition and rivalry, but then there's also like, well, what do you do for this? And then it's like, so
camaraderie.
Yeah, there's a camaraderie and there's rivalry, and and then there's sort of like, you're kind of spying over the other one, like, what you doing here? And like, it's fun. It makes it fun like that. But I do want to be respectful of your time. I've got you like 20 minutes over now, because we kind of BS'd before, so it's fine. But I want to be respectful of your time and let you go. Tell me, what are you doing now? Who are you looking to work with? And how do people get a hold of you? Give me your plug here at the end.
Never even made it to the Apex Award.
Do what?
We never even made it to the Apex Award, explaining that one either.
Oh.
But, I was the Apex Award winner, the Broker of the Year for Agribusiness. That was a great blessing. I was really, really surprised by it. At this current market that I'm in, I'm really looking for more inventory. I still have good buyers. I need some diversity. There are some who are shying away from Tyson, even though they shouldn't. There are some that will. They'll turn around and go back to them. A lot of what I have is Tyson inventory. So I definitely need more inventory with different integrators, or for people who produce for different integrators. Definitely a lot of my buyers. I definitely always, want to help anyone who's looking to get into the industry. If you, even if it's not something you want to do today, hey, call me and let's make you a plan. Let's make a plan that gets you up that down payment. Let's make a plan that invests in that piece of land that we can work on paying off. So that way, when the next expansion rolls around, you're ready to build. Like, this is a long-term thing. So let's make that plan and get that in place. So just anyone that I can help. If you're a buyer looking for a poultry farm right now, give me a call. If you're a person, a farmer, or just someone who is interested in the poultry industry and think they might eventually want to get into it, or if you're young and starting out and think, well, I want to do this by the time I'm this age, give me a call and let me help you make that plan. Let's make that plan a reality and set the things in place to make this easier when it comes time. And if you are a farmer who is, ready to retire or have those children that want to take on the farm, or, just looking to get into a different industry, then give me a call and I'll be glad to help you. I have a Facebook. It is, I had to pull it up. It left me. But I have a Facebook. Let's see. I have my Facebook account. I stay on my emails every day. We're on nationalland.com. You can look us up by our different offices, and mine's the Southeastern Land. My Facebook is the National Land Realty Southeast Alabama Poultry Division. You can also contact any of my teammates on my team as well. They can point you to me. And my cell phone is listed on our website as well, along with my email address.
I will include all the links to all of the things in the show notes for this. And Ashley, it's always fantastic talking to you. Thank you very, very much for spending some time here today. Outside of managing the things that you manage on a daily. So it's very, very much appreciated. Thank you.
I appreciate you having me on here.
We're going to do this again. I need to get some more information on poultry for sure up on the podcast. So thank you again.
Oh, and look for my latest blog coming out on the roller coaster ride at the Poultry Integrators.
Yes, that will be coming out. Bryce is working on that right now.
Okay, thanks.
This concludes episode number 47 for the National Land Realty podcast, discussing all about poultry farms with National Land Realty agent Ashley McCraney. You can learn more about land ownership and the buying and selling of land at nationalland.com.